Hamre. I'm hosting this last session, last but not least. And we already have a lively discussion about manliest presentations and projects related to beards. I must admit that I tried to really grow my beard also during the pandemic period, but my baby face could not stand up to the challenge, and I keep cutting it down sometimes. It's too embarrassing, to be honest. But we have other presenters here in the last session with a lot better outcomes in this project of beard growing, as you can probably already see. But again, so the last session, session 5, is gamification and rising industries, and the papers are in different ways related to sort of gameful industries and how games and sort of these industries and the cultures around them interact. And we have 3 presentations. First one, if I'm correct, is going to be by Solip Park, Migrated or Migrating Game Work, a case study of Korean game expats in Finland. Our second presentation will be by Tobias Scholz and Lisa Völkel, Carolin Uebach and Volker Stein, called Game Changer, a systematization of sports teams participating in esports. And the final presentation of the conference by Joaquin Cestino, Joseph Macey and Brian McCauley, aiming for validity, the experience of conflicts in legitimacy judgments in esports actors and new grassroots activism. And so, Solip, would you be ready? And by the way, maybe I'll just remind now as well that at the end of the session, we will have a vote for the best presentation and best poster. So be ready at the end of the presentation to open the link that will be given to you in the chat and be ready to make your vote. So already maybe start sort of the thinking process of who you might want to vote. The presentation again, 10+5. And if our first presenter, Solip, is ready, we can go ahead. Solip,
okay.
Welcome. You can take the stage.
Thank you. Okay, I'll try to share my slide now. Does the slide work? Okay, great.
It does.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It is very exciting, and it has been a very fun conference experience online as well. So here I am. I'm trying to presentate my article called Migrated or Migrating, depending on how you refer to it, game work, and a case study of Korean game expats in Finland. I'm a doctoral student at Aalto University School of Arts, Design and Architecture in the Department of Media under the supervision of Berttu Hamelainen and Anna-Kaisa Kultima. So this is a case study, like in the title says, a case study of Korean game expats in Finland. Is actually a pilot phase of my doctoral dissertation project, which I'm planning to do over the course of 4 years, concentrating on people that creates games, aka who I like to call them as game creators, and the local context within the culture of game production, in this case, Finland. And by combining these two, I'm highly interested in how the influence of locality of game production culture tend to influence the experience process upon relocation. So there are people who are moving across different countries to do game work, and they are out there, and I'm interested in to know their experience and how they view how migration influence their behavior and game making practices. So why now is obvious fact. 27% of game creators in Finland are coming from abroad. And this is not just the isolated incident. Similar survey has been conducted in UK, also showed 1/4 of their game creators are from abroad. IGDA developer survey also revealed that roughly 17 to 20% of people identify themselves as immigrants. So this is a growing phenomenon, and a lot of people are creating games outside of their home country. And there's also a growing interest, therefore, the cultural aspects of game productions. And interest towards who makes the game and how game creators do and think when they make decisions upon installing, implementing, designing game features. How do that work and how does it influence the actual game? My supervisor, Anna-Kaisa Kultima, has also been raising a lot of notions about multidisciplinarity and multitudes of game production culture, as well as O'Donnell and Whiston and Sotama. I also have to address here that I send great thanks to reviewers of GamiFIN who also sent me a great reviews and recommendations of the articles. And so during the review process, I managed to bring up more literatures and I was able to strengthen my theoretical background on this. So I'm very, in here I can't express how much grateful I am for that. So thank you very much. In this paper, if I try to call who do I refer to as game expats, I refer to as game creators that experience either assigned or self-initiated migration primarily due to their game profession, with or without concrete long-term future plans for a settlement, directly or indirectly due to precarious job contracts, short-terms, long-terms, contracts of video game industry. And in this topic, I specifically concentrated on South Korean game expats in Finland. The reason why I chose this specific samples are more detailed out in my paper. So this was qualitative research concentrated on very small numbers of samples, 5 South Korean game expats. Pre-survey was conducted prior to the interview, asking their field of expertise, durations in game profession, duration lived in Finland, immigration status, and their preferred language of conducting the interview. Turns out that these are all, most of them are senior positions game developers, 4 of which worked in multiple different countries before coming to Finland. So starting off their career from Korea and then migrated to many different countries. And right now they are in Finland. There is a group called Finco Dev here in Finland, where is a group of South Korean developers, IT industry, game industry workers in Finland. So I closely worked with them and observed these data samples, interviewees, public appearances in their seminars and meeting, and then notes of those observations were used. Semi-structured interview, which approximately took an hour each, were asked with the interviewees. And I specifically asked about the motivation and experience of their relocation to Finland in this case. Opinion about working in Finnish game companies, their own opinions. Cultural encounters, if there were any, and their process of integration, and their future plans. All of the interviews, as a record, was conducted in Korean language, and I transcribed and translated all of them into English, which further went through the thematic analysis. So for detail out what was the result, I first have to make a claimer that this is the initial finding from a small pilot phase data. I'm collecting more data here, and then with more different type of nationalities. And I'm pretty sure the initial findings that I raised here could get debunked later in the future. And I hope that I might be the one who also debunked that. We'll see. Let's see. So I noticed that there were a total of 3 patterns of value clashed happened in the South Korean game expats upon their relocation to Finland. First of all was the value clash between the quantitative rewards that they expect versus non-quantitative rewards that the employers, in this case Finnish game studios, promised. So these aspects was often addressing career. The word career was addressed really frequently, and migration to Finland was actually considered as a decrease of their career building. By looking into, go deep into this question, I noticed that this career usually refers to the increase of salary, so financial compensation. So the salary offered by the Finnish companies weren't necessarily matched with their expectations, whereas in Finnish companies were often addressing that they're autonomous, the freedom, horizontal organization structure and ownership of the product in this game was more emphasized by the company. So there were a little bit of miscommunication, maybe a value clash happened in between during the phase of very initial first primary phase in between these game expats and the Finnish game companies. The second clash was related to the team, the decision-making process. So game expats express, like I said, again, these are the people who worked not just in Korea, but all around the world and then came to Finland. And then these expats' expectation was the creative leadership, whereas in how the exercises conducted in Finnish game companies or their team, of course, there is multicultural, but then many of the Finnish colleagues, especially focusing more on the creative committee consensus alignment, where they prioritize the consensus among the team and clear project precision and path binding prior to going to the actual project initiation. Whereas in game expats expectation, they get sort of concerned that these consensus alignment process might hinder making the quick, rapid decisions and iterations. And then another value clash was happening in terms of how they understand how the game job hiring process has been conducted. So in Finland, referral is considered to be quite important according to this game expats experience, which they claim that because they are not aware of type of hiring customs here in Finland, they felt less competitive and therefore less likely to able to continue working in the game industry in Finland unless they try really hard understanding, trying to learn these customs. And therefore all of our interviewees wasn't very sure about the long-term settlements here in Finland, despite their senior and permanent position employees. There were people who wanted to stay longer, of course, but they just wasn't sure 100% about their future. So by diving into the context of it, I realized that there is a two different counterbalance between happening in the establishment or building of the game production culture. One could be the country, the very local aspect, what is grounded up by the cultural and social norms of in the region by the people building the studio and working on the studio together. Whereas in other aspect is much more cooperative, transnational, top-down system where it's a standardized positions based on global value chain. And especially seems like the balance seems to be a little bit more towards local if the studio is very independent and locally established with independency in their decision-making process, whereas it could be a little bit more corporate-driven and standardized and top-down structures if the studio is actually influenced or directly acquired or governed by the multinational game corporations. And the context of this cultural clash was the data revealed that there is a generalization among the game creators, kind of assuming that the country-to-country relocations within game companies shouldn't take much long time. Because one, the tools are the same. Agile is dominantly used in many different countries, including Korea and Finland. And then software tools, engines are quite similar. Therefore, these expats had this type of imagination or assumptions that it shouldn't take long. It's very easy to go out there in the world and in the game creator's identity, we can just go wherever we want. However, the reality when they actually describe how long it took them to actually get used to the environment, the new environment, it often took several months to up to several years. And there was also sort of like a ignorance of cultural differences among the game production, where the certain type of practices are considered right or wrong issue rather than different. So despite the game is very cultural, creative entertainment, the process of making it inside of it was divided into whether it's right or wrong. So therefore, it was these game expat experience quite like a one-sided adaptations of reprioritizing their tasks And the risk and confusion of this value clash often fell into the individual's own risk and responsibility. So what this tells us is that one, identity of game creators are very pluralistic. The motivation of game work, in this case, game professional, is not singular, but diverse and complex. Just the passion of game doesn't explain everything here. Obviously, because it's a profession of game, its surrounding reality and social and even the legislation affects a lot when these game creators decide to move or to work at the outside country. And second is that the game production culture is multitudinous, is very diverse. Although we often assume that the occupational community of game creators are quite transnational, and the tools that we use in the game production are somewhat similar. However, the cultural aspect of game production is indeed multitudinous and interdisciplinary. Like the very own characteristic of game work, game is interdisciplinary field, and therefore how to make games are quite differently culturally interpreted in many different areas. And also the country, the regional cultural norm aspect and custom, and both the corporate and the global HQ aspects are counterbalancing with each other. So for implementations, I would seek that more diverse strategies meeting among, in this case, Finnish game companies' global talent recruitment to better align with this type of various expectations of game expats coming from a different type of way to define the career, define what is game and what is a success. Recruitment has to be considered. And I would also urge that enhancement of cultural awareness within game companies, within creators, and even ourselves in academia might have to be more discussed, understanding that game making is not about right or wrong. It could be a very cultural thing that we have to say it's different, maybe. But so it's something that I want to seek further develop throughout my doctoral research. So let's see, it's a very big topic that I just discovered from these data. The limitation is, of course, it's a small number of data, although it's a qualitative research. And the scope and nationality, and especially the gender of this interviewees were limited. They were all male, senior positions around similar age, and coming from obviously the same country. So this has to be further developed. And also, I also have to make an excuse. I'm the single author of this paper with no other colleagues that were able to help me or funding that I could able to support myself for this. So the paper is pilot phase, and hopefully I can iterate these type of limitations for moving on forward. And therefore, my current plan is to conducting follow-up interviews and observations of these Korean game expats, and I'm going to trace their development and changes over the next 4 years. So it's going to be longitudinal research. And then game expats from other nationalities here in Finland are also currently being interviewed. I'm currently doing data collections of them. Roughly 20 of them have been gathered, and I'm very surprised that a lot of people, a lot of game developers in Finland are expressing their interest in this topic. So I'm very excited, and hopefully I can continue on this. I'm also a comic artist, if you're surprised about that. So I'm visualizing some of the findings of my data from my analysis into a comic form, and right now releasing it through my social media, hoping that this would also help promoting my findings as well as this research topic itself. So hopefully I didn't over the time or anything, and it was very exciting presentation. And yeah, I'm open for questions now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Solip. That was a very great presentation, a very interesting plunge into, looking at the cultures and, people who make the environments in which we really spend, well, maybe too much of our time in. But time is running, but I think we could have maybe one question. So who wants to ask a question? Let me see if I can see any hands here. Do I see any hands? Joe, go ahead.
Hi there. Thanks for that. That's very interesting. One thing which you very rightly mentioned was this kind of idea of culture clash in some way, because although even the fact that games business is multi and interdisciplinary, etc. You mentioned the idea that some people felt that they were told that this is not a game, you know, this is the way to make a game or whatever. Do you think, I said, I'm not sure if you would have the funding or the opportunity to do this or whatever, but I was wondering if the kinds of cultural clashes that are being experienced are the result of moving from one culture to a very different one, you know, from a Korean to a Northern European. Although personally, I think there are a few similarities between Korean and Finnish culture, but we won't go into that. But I was wondering if you thought about comparing or investigating the same issue in regard to, for example, Koreans who might work in China, perhaps.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it's actually the fundamental motivations of why I decided to expand the data set to the other nationalities. So I'm physically here in Finland, and because of COVID-19, I wasn't able to go to Korea or other countries to take interviews or contact with Koreans outside world. So instead, I reached out to game expats working in Finland from many different nationalities. So that's ongoing, and I'm very excited. Although I cannot just make assumptions or blurt conclusion from this ongoing data collections, but however, I also personally kind of sense this regional cultural map of game production that could be maybe possible maybe one day if I have more data and then able to go further with this research. Maybe we can kind of sort of, there is like a cultural value triangle, and there's a lot of like cultural analysis about like similarities of one culture to another on regional basis. So maybe we can kind of do that, make a sort of like a framework of game production culture, which I think that will be very beneficial for recruiters and industries and even academia to understand what type of dialogue communications have to be encouraged in order to become more multicultural and transcultural environment of gaming making.
Yeah, indeed. And there's also potential factors like for example, the power distance index, where a country like Korea, which has much more kind of rigid hierarchies compared to a country like Finland, where the hierarchical differences are much smaller and maybe, you know, a wider kind of variation within these different strata. So yeah, you could potentially rank different countries or cultures by their power distance. Well, ranking is not the nicest word, but you know what I mean. Kind of, you know, arrange perhaps to see how these different values are manifest. But thank you very much. You know, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Joe, for a very good question and discussion. And thank you, Solip, again for a great presentation. And now let's move on from the game developers to the esports teams by Tobias. Go ahead, Tobias. The stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. And hello, everybody from the wonderful Siegen. Sadly, not in this castle, but yeah, someday we will return. We will look a bit in esports. The idea, or what sparked us to do this research, was actually this claim: traditional sports invade esports. And that was quite fascinating to read this article or discuss this, that suddenly we are in an environment where we are going from offline to the digital world. So the plan, or what we saw in the process, that traditional sports try to, you could say, sportify esports. And we see it with leagues like Overwatch, which are assembled like the baseball league and completely in the traditional way. And somehow over the time, we observed, or we see it now, especially with Overwatch League, that this is not the case, that this gamification or esportification is still prevalent. So suddenly this completely traditional league, traditional sports league in esports is turning to one of the most innovative esports leagues to date. And that was our starting point. And we looked into the data and saw there is nothing on, or there are no consecutive data sets. So esports and sports. So we all know esports is something new, growing, underdeveloped still. You still can be an early adapter, expand into the digital environment and reaching an international audience. But at the same time, we see in traditional sports, they have a problem with their viewership. They are getting older. NBA is still one of the youngest. If you look at MLB, they are now in the 60s in the average age of the viewer. And esports, even though despite many people think it's only for the young ones, it is still younger than many sports and many traditional sports. So we see that more and more sports teams are going into it. Just a short definition, more in a broader sense. Esports is a cultural phenomenon with resemblance rooted in sports, media, entertainment, and culture, but emerged in a digitized environment, thereby evolved beyond the constraints of traditional sports, media, entertainment, and culture. And that makes it fascinating to observe that traditional sports joins in, but most of the time people are just writing it. So we wanted to look into deeper. We have a categorization of sports teams investing in esports. We are looking mostly on professional teams, so not the amateur teams who are joining or having an esports club, but sports teams that are on a high level. So there are also sports players. First, individual esports players for the digital version of the core business. So a sports team is getting a FIFA player, for example. In Germany, there's one case where the player is called Sascha Mockenhaupt. He's playing for SV Sandhausen as a player and as an esport player. Quite fascinating that he is actually even quite good in FIFA. Esports teams for a variety of games, so not only one, but many. Esports teams for a variety of games in a different country. So they are not focusing on their own country, but a different one. Joint ventures with an existing esports team and creating a new brand. So they're choosing not to use their own name, but another one. We have here this category of temporarily withdrawing from esports, creating a dedicated league, buying a franchise team. So in those new franchise leagues, and what we see more and more, individual sports investors. So for example, players like Stephen Curry from Golden State Warriors investing in a different team than the Golden State Warriors owning Golden State Guardians, which is quite fascinating to observe. Yeah, we collected data between 2017 and 19, used all the data sets because there is no central governance institutionalized federation. So we had to do a snowball method and cross-referenced it as much as possible. And yeah, just to give you a simple overview, where from that idea that we have one team in 2003, a long spread, nothing happens. And then 2014, it emerged again. And this spark in 2018 is solely due to the idea that the Japanese football league said every team in the first, second, and I think even third league had to do some esports. So you had suddenly a spark of 40 teams. But interestingly, we see a downfall, and it becomes increasingly relevant in 2020, where we see teams exiting esports. So there is, for example, VfB Stuttgart, a football club, who specifically said, we are leaving esports because it's too expensive. Could be other reasons, but that was their narrative. FC Copenhagen had a Counter-Strike team called North, also exited it. And just to give you an overview about the data, those are the percentages. So the majority is creating a dedicated league that is mostly pitched by some federation like the Japanese Football League or the German Football League, where suddenly you have 40 teams out of nothing. At the same time, that is something we see in Germany and France quite a lot. They are signing one player for the game, and that's it. Yeah, but that's the idea where we see still joint ventures not that often. And the idea of esports teams for variety games in a different country, which is actually quite fascinating, and we will discuss that at one case, is sadly not that often. To give you just 3 examples. The first example, the one team nobody knows, but actually is the one that, paved the way. SSV Lenitz is a German team in east of Germany, first professional sports organization in esports, 2003 until 2006. They played in the World Cyber Games with a Swedish team and participated as well in the Brazil tournament. So you have this team, which is not that professional in Germany. So they had some football team, not on the highest league, but quite fascinating to observe. And yeah, they tried to, and those are words we gathered from some interviews: brand awareness, international expansion, attracting a young audience, attracting new sponsors, and improving their image. Keep in mind, they had a Counter-Strike team, and they said, we are using Counter-Strike to improve our image. At that time, in Germany, it was still seen as a killer game. And but they tried to achieve it. Still ahead of their time, we have had too many obligations of the German legal framework, and counterproductive for our endeavors. So they struggled a lot with that. And therefore, they stopped it and could not professionalize it. FC Schalke 04, probably many of us in 2016, League of Legends and FIFA, even bought the franchise slot, probably 5 million, and are extremely popular. Maybe one of you heard of the Schalke 04 Miracle Run, where internationally it is a meme. It is a slogan many people know. And their interesting goal is to integrate it into their family. So esports and sports are together. And when the esports team made it into the playoffs in the LEC, they showed it in the arena in a home game. Sadly, possibility that it will be sold, but not because this team is not profitable. They are extremely profitable, but the team is failing in football extremely, and they need to sell their stuff. So here another quote from one of the CEOs. From a business point of view, if we go to the Worlds are the finals, this would mean so much to the club. It would be massive to have a global audience, global eyeballs everywhere with millions of people. So that shows how important it is for them. The third case, Paris Saint-Germain. Also quite fascinating, as it is one of the few that exited it and re-entered and have a joint venture strategy. It is completely novel, at least in esports. So they started in 2016, exited in 2018, and came back with a joint venture strategy in Dota 2 with a Chinese esports organization. So attracting a new market in 2020 with a Hong Kong organization. And they actually say, we want brand diversification. We want to go to Asia. We want to show the Asian people there is Paris Saint-Germain. And by that, as you see on the top, Paris Saint-Germain is a logo, and the other part is the Talon esports logo. So they are merging everything together. And therefore, their strategy is open the way to the Asian continent, as well Eastern Europe or North America, where Dota is very well established. But it shows there is a clear strategy behind that. Yeah, therefore, as a short summary, no one best way to enter esports, which is quite not surprising. Esport is extremely heterogeneous, and more teams are realizing we have to understand esports and we cannot copy paste what we are doing in sports. Still, teams are shying away to use their brand and create new ones. I said the Golden State Warriors with their team is Golden Guardians. Only few teams like FC Schalke and Paris Saint-Germain, Besiktas Istanbul, and those teams are successful by utilizing those synergies. You see both teams, and this is actually a strategy where you see you can reach the young audience if they understand, hey, that is Schalke 04. And quite surprising, if you look, Schalke 04 is here in the area, and they have a rivalry between Borussia Dortmund. They are big enemies, but somehow still big diehard Dortmund fans are cheering for FC Schalke 04 esports, which is a big thing. Yeah, sports teams Spotify esports in terms of training and other sports related competence, but it is clear that esports is also gamifying somewhat the sports environment. And we see it in other aspects where suddenly, especially in the US, that teams are understanding, hey, if we learn how to do esports, which they're still struggling, but if we learn that, we are able to understand how to reach the young audience. Still, COVID-19 led to a re-evaluation, and we see it going down with exits like VfB Stuttgart and North with FC Copenhagen due to the costs. So it becomes evident that the idea of sportifying esports is not that easy as they thought. And there is actually other direction that esports is probably at some parts gamifying the real world. And we see it with games like FIFA becoming increasingly important. The idea of Fortnite, where players are the title. In the COVID pandemic, many sports players started streaming and all that. So we see actually the other direction around. Yeah, and that's all from my side. I hope I'm good in the time.
Thank you, Tobias. A very interesting presentation. And let's go for questions. Do we have any hands? Solip, I think, I'm not sure if that's applause or a hand raised for questions.
That was also the question I have.
All right, go ahead.
I'm a huge fan of esports from Korea, obviously. So I wonder, was there any sort of indicators or factors that the relationship with the company of game could have affected this type of sports organizations to arrange the esports team? For example, copyright issues, which has been the major issues of broadcasting companies and teams and operating teams. Actually, the esports team in Korea, where Blizzard, for example, started to claim their own values in their esports scene, and therefore the relationship. Was there any sort of that type of indicators in the case here in Europe?
It is a worldwide list. So yeah, definitely you see it, especially if you are talking about Blizzard, you see it with the story about StarCraft at all. But at the same time, Overwatch, it was really sold hard by Blizzard to NHL and NBA teams. So they actually tried to get those investors, leading to the idea that suddenly some traditional esports teams were not able to get in. And that's quite fascinating to observe. It's at the same time, if you look at FIFA, NBA, and all those NBA and FIFA, those games, there's a competition. So suddenly you have Konami and Electronic Arts having a race to it. Who is getting the official league in NBA? I think in NBA it's 2K League. And in FIFA, it's the FIFA game and not Pro Evolution Soccer. So suddenly all of the developers want to get in. At the same time, if you look at Counter-Strike and Valve, Valve is doing nothing to sell their product. And so you don't see any big Counter-Strike teams, despite the idea it's a killer game, that they are joining in sports teams.
Thank you, Solip, for a good question, and Tobias for a good answer. And we have a bunch of questions here. Firstly, in the chat, I would maybe want to raise one from the chat, which is shared by Samuli and Hendrik both. So Samuli and Hendrik, which one of you would like to maybe also voice the question? Okay, Hendrik is volunteering Samuli to ask it, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, hello, nice beard.
Thank you.
What I just wanted to mention, because I used to be a chess player. I guess I still am, and there I've seen a revitalization of chess on Twitch lately, and TSM started to sponsor Hikaru Nakamura now, who is the former second best player in the world, and this is really huge for the chess world. So this is one of the examples. You mentioned that esports is impacting traditional sports. I don't know if you want to count chess as a sport, but still. So do you think there will be an increasing fusion where certain teams operate in both esport and sports, and there will be no longer the divide between esport and sport will disappear this way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the chess game is, or the chess example is quite fascinating to observe that so many esports teams are getting chess players, where beforehand everybody would say chess is bigger than esports, and suddenly, okay, we are doing it differently, and the whole live streaming idea, and the case with this Sascha Mockenhaupt guy is also quite fascinating, that he plays professional in second Bundesliga, and he plays professionally esports, that we see such types become more and more. And with the augmented reality, virtual reality, have a discussion about if it's esports or not, but the barriers are breaking down, and suddenly you have those. And we saw it in the COVID pandemic with racing simulations, where suddenly you saw tournaments with professional racing and professional e-racing people doing Formula One courses. And we see it breaking down more and more, as it is quite interesting with such tools where those are more technical, but racing sims is probably the one where we see breaking down. And there's one player who is now driving, not in Formula One, but in another racing way in the real world. Started out in the virtual world and is now in the real world.
Yeah, thanks. I guess there is a certain subset of, for example, simulation, where we have an accurate comparison between the two. Chess is another example, but you can't implement League of Legends in the real world. So there will be some.
Why not? Of course you can.
Would be lovely.
Just wait and see next GamiFIN, our extracurricular activities, League of Legends in real life.
I'm looking forward to it.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, Samuli already dominated yesterday evening in the digital realm. Let's see how it goes in the physical one. But hey, time is running. I can give one more question. I will give it to Joaquin. I'm not sure how to, or is it Joaquin? And I believe
Joaquin.
You're also the presenter of the next paper, am I right? So then perhaps you can sort of, segue yourself from a question to your presentation and take the stage. Thank you.
Tobias, thank you very much for your presentation. I was just curious about one thing. I mean, you were mentioning a couple of examples of physical sports clubs leaving esports, and you were saying that one of the reasons they're voicing or they're using as a justification for leaving esports is that it's becoming too expensive. And then you were also suggesting that you have second thoughts about that. You were hinting that there could be other hidden reasons there. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, it's the idea where it's the easy answer to say it's too expensive. At the same time, it is something where you see that their strategy didn't work. So for the case of North, they did a good job, at least in a certain perspective, but they were unable to translate in a good results. VfB Stuttgart is also a great example where they actually had disabled players, which was quite a fascinating part, where one of the FIFA player had was disabled, which is actually quite fascinating. But at the end, they thought, okay, we need to cut costs. What are the costs that nobody cares about in that way? And we see it with FC Schalke quite recently, where if they are relegated, they need to sell their stuff. They need to sell as much as possible. And they said, okay, what can we sell? They sell something from their infrastructure, they sell something there, they may sell the team, which is still debated, but for example, they will not sell their talent school for their football players. And so it is a strategic decision, as any sports club at the moment struggles with COVID. They need to think about it. And at the moment, esports is for many teams the easiest way to sell.
Okay, pretty interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so I may continue with my presentation. I'm going to share my screen. I don't know if you see it.
Looks good.
Okay, so let me see if I can go. Yeah, it works. So I'm going to present. This is of course, a paper, but it's basically a work in progress. It's something I'm doing with Joseph Macey and Brian McCauley, and I'm a postdoc researcher at Jönköping International Business School, affiliated to the Media Management and Transformation Center. And I have to start saying that I know very little about esports, but so for me, I mean, one of the most interesting things that came out of trying to understand eSport is that how complex and multifaceted is competitive video gaming. And one particular example that actually struck me quite a lot and actually triggered this research was this apparent paradox between what Tobias was saying before. I mean, how fast the field of esports is growing, how much it has become already a phenomenon of global significance, and at the same time, how much many actors in the field are still experiencing some sort of struggles with issues of lack of legitimacy. And that came in a very sharply way in a recent workshop we hosted at Jönköping International Business School a few months ago, where top researchers and relevant practitioners took part in it. And this issue of lack of legitimacy came out as one of the most important issues in the field of esports. That combines quite surprisingly with this super huge phenomenon. Physical sports clubs join the esports field, and still actors struggling with lack of legitimacy. At the same time, very much at the local level in Sweden, what we are starting to become more aware of is that there are a bunch of activist movements emerging, and all of them trying to organize local esports activities in a way that bring legitimacy to the field. And as a result of bringing legitimacy, supporting their activities further. There was a recent paper published by one of my co-authors in this paper, but we start to become aware of this phenomenon, but we still need to understand it better from a theoretical perspective. So what do we know? What we know is that the literature on activism and social movements already acknowledges quite widely that some individuals become agents of institutional change. That we know. And we know quite much about how these actors or agents behave when they start to be successful. So one of the problems is this literature is that all these agents are usually presented as extremely resourceful. They have already a lot of resources. They are full of foresight. They knew what was coming, and they are very skillful. They are artful in actually in exploiting institutional contradictions in the field. What we still don't know in this literature is that because we paid attention so much to later stages in these institutional entrepreneurs, we know very little about how they actually, what makes them in the very first place, and what makes an ordinary activist, those that are perhaps not under the spotlight, those that are still not very famous. That combines with a new literature that it's a concept that has been used quite extensively in organizational theory, the concept of legitimacy, but we're starting to understand better how lack of legitimacy or struggles of legitimacy may actually play a role in emerging or triggering some sort of institutional change. This is being framed today with the specific literature of micro foundations of legitimacy. And they are bringing quite progressive concepts that may allow us to understand better what's happening in these very early stages of the triggering of an institutional actor, okay? What is legitimacy? Well, legitimacy from an organizational theory perspective is a generalized perception. So it's a perception that some actions, behaviors, or organizations are appropriate within a socially constructed system of norms, values, beliefs, and definitions. And this current attention to the micro processes of legitimacy, it started to understand that legitimacy perceptions, these individual perceptions of legitimacy, is actually combining two different perceptive inputs. One is propriety judgments. And I'm presenting this concept because they are important later to understand our findings. It's propriety judgment, that is the personal beliefs of the individual. What you think makes one entity or one behavior, one organization acceptable and desirable. And at the same time, there is a second input that actors or individuals take into account, which is the validity judgments, which is the appearance of consensus. That's that thing you are actually evaluating is acceptable. And that, of course, depends on your own perceptions of what social norms are thought you think actually dominate at the collective level. So it is in this combination of propriety judgment and validity judgment that you make your own judgment, and then you consider something is legitimate or not. The problem here the progress that are making from a theoretical perspective, the empirical research in this literature is still very much overly focused on the legitimizing efforts of these actors, what they do with their resources, what kind of strategies they enact, what kind of tools they use, this kind of stuff. So we still know very little because not sufficient attention has been paid to the very early stages. The same question we had before from the social movements and activism. We still know very little about what happens in relation to the personal individual experience of legitimacy and the initial mobilization for collective action, okay? So this kind of gap in this combination of literatures, micro foundations of legitimacy, and social movements is what triggered our research question. And our research question is, how do personal experiences of legitimacy trigger and shape actor mobilization for collective action? Of course, we place our research in the specific empirical setting of esports, but our intention is not to contribute only to the literature of esports, despite being extremely interesting, but also to the original theoretical fields we are using as theoretical lenses. So, and we are starting to address this question with an interpretative phenomenological analysis, IPA, that doesn't stand for Indian Pale Ale Action, but this interpretative phenomenological analysis, that the focus here, the unit of analysis, is how actors make sense of their individual experiences and actions. Here, the goal is to reveal that socially constructed meaning behind personal experience. And that is why usually the samples in these studies are relatively simple, but despite the smallness of the size, it's really important to go quite deep in the collection and the analysis of the data. Here, of course, as I mentioned before, the emphasis is this detail, understanding this detailed meaning of each case, and using the information we get from our informants as treating our informants as knowledgeable participants actually in the research. So the way we're just helping them to make sense of their own experience, and then we help them also to interpret them. The empirical setting, as I was saying, is esports in Sweden. In particular, we have selected two prominent esports associations, possibly the two that are leading the field in Sweden at this point, and both of them are organizing grassroots communities. And within these organizations, we have selected six participants, 3 in each one of them. All of them are senior members with a long experience in esports, long experience in these organizations themselves. And unfortunately, all of them male, but that is possibly reflecting the current context in the field in Sweden, and age 23, 27, very much in line with what Tobias was saying. I mean, the average age here is around 29, 30, not necessarily what we may have in mind as teenagers, right? So we started to collect data in May 2019. We are hopefully going to be done with the field research soon, perhaps this summer. And our main source of information has been interviews, as IPA usually does. And we started our interviews with open dialogues, just letting basically the participants tell us, share us their personal biographies, their personal stories in relation to esports and their current organizations. And then, of course, we had follow-up interviews, and then everything was taped and transcribed so that we could do a quite detailed analysis. At this point, we have 15 different interviews with these 6 participants, a minimum of 2 interviews per participant, in some other cases up to 4 interviews, and no less than 2 hours of deep conversations with these participants, in some cases close to 4 hours of conversation. So, and then building good levels of trust. So I believe we have access to very relevant information about them. And then we have complemented this source of data with observations, so that we were not only seeing what they were saying, but also seeing what they were doing. So we were observing some sort of activities in these organizations. We were attending some meetings where they were present, and they were actually complementing this also with documents about the organizations, like the websites, strategic documents, and other working materials, and then reports on the state of esports in Sweden, so that we could contextualize what we were saying, what we were seeing in what they were saying and what they were doing. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in the analysis steps of analysis, but it's important to say that usually IPA requires a stepwise approach to the analysis. It's quite regulated, and we have tried to follow these steps quite closely. Just a few comments here. We started obviously with data collection and open coding. Something really important to mention here is that every participant has been interviewed by two of the researchers. Me was one of them, Brian was the other one, and we both together were in an iterative way, comparing our initial codings, discussing about them, and coming with a coding scheme. Then that resulted in a second step of actual coding, very typical in this kind of research, and identifying initial patterns. Interestingly, here we came with building a table of superordinate themes, and we were able to identify patterns that were working across all cases. At that point, we tried to build additional impartiality. So we add a third researcher Joe to the team, and he went through everything we had done. He with a fresh mind, a very fresh approach, and he helped us go through the table of the master table of subordinate teams, the regional codings, and the narrative account of our final findings. Again, what is important to say here is that across the findings we have, the kind of models we have developed is consistent with the data emerging for every single one of our participants. And this is the model that actually summarized our findings. So a model of the experience of conflicts, illegitimacy judgments, and the emergence of grassroots activism. And the model starts with, as you remember, was presenting these two inputs in legitimacy judgments, propriety and validity judgment. What we see in our cases is a conflict among them. And a couple of examples here, and just we have examples obviously in every single one of the cases. Just two quotes that as examples of this conflict. One of our informants says, "I wanted to try out if I could build esports companies as an actual proper company." Obviously, it was a propriety judgment for this guy, but I got quite a backlash for that, because at that point there was nobody taking it seriously, lack of validity. I got some praise, and also some people that did not understand what esports was. Parents don't understand it. Soccer parents understand. Again, propriety judgment in conflict with a validity judgment. That happened in every single case. That somehow interact with a critical reflection. It triggered critical reflections, kind of a consciousness about something going on there that somehow was also shaping the conflict of these judgments. And again, a couple of quotes illustrating this. One of our informants says, "Being on the outside, he had left the field for some time, he was joining back. I noticed," so understanding, like I couldn't understand why they would not that, why they would do that, because I'm not like that. So suddenly he understood, wow, there's a conflict here. So being aware of something, critical reflection about it. The same happens with another informant. It's puzzling that the adults in general don't know what it is, and they don't know how to talk about it, and they only read what's posted on Aftonbladet. This is a leading tabloid here in Sweden, and all about things that's posted about games. What is interesting here is that these two elements that somehow summarize motives or reasons for acting actually were followed by a sort of emotional struggle. This emotional struggle was not equivalent, was not similar in every single of our participants. They were high and low in this emotional struggle, but every one of them had some sort of emotional struggle. And again, some examples. One of our informants says, "My parents did not want to have me play." Well, I think that we have all perhaps shared that to some extent. And I would not want anything else but to play. So there was a struggle for some years, obviously. Another one has a more sophisticated kind of emotional struggle. He says, "I realized that I could get better than anybody at esports. So I wanted to do esports and maybe make some money, but they didn't pay out the prize money. There was no salaries. There was no future in it." And he was saying this obviously with an obvious suffering there. There was emotional struggle there. And again, this emotional struggle intimately interacts with a mobilization. So the higher the emotional struggle, the higher the level of mobilization in these actors. And at the same time, the higher the level of mobilization, the higher, or perhaps the shape of this emotional struggle was also evolving. And that was a quite interesting process. And again, a couple of examples. One says, "We started a brand new community. I talked with some friends. We wanted to be one of the biggest release organizations for that." And another one says, "I wanted to do things that create some kind of change somewhere. It could be big, could be that small, doesn't matter. I need to change something. I know the culture, I'm reading about the culture." And again, so this
Joaquin, sorry, the time is running a bit. Maybe can you start wrapping up soon?
Okay? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Again, this combination of emotional struggle and mobilization was followed by an intention to do things. And they all share an aiming for validity, which can be expressed in this way. We were trying to approach we were trying to find an approach that everybody was comfortable with. So, and in this case, we're copying other sports. Or another one that parents should understand what their kids are doing. Again, aiming for validity. In this case, they were trying to bring the community around it, trying to explain how the community worked. And this aiming for validity is, again, a very strong interaction with grassroots collective actions. And they actually explicitly say that and organize it in that way. So one says, get these grassroots levels, a bottom-up process, etc. So this is the model that actually summarizes how the experience of conflicts in legitimacy judgments links to the emergence of grassroots activism. And we can see it also in a temporal way. So there are interactions along the way, be motivated to act, acting, organizing, acting for an end, to some extent, some happen not in a stepwise process, but we can see sometimes some simultaneity there happening, settling in almost at the same time in one single stroke, okay? So what is the potential contributions of this model? First, to the micro of legitimacy. As we were saying, that there are a lot of theoretical models about the micro of legitimacy. They usually state that when there is a conflict between propriety and validity judgments, there is a suppression of the propriety judgment, that it provides a protection of the 16 others. What we see is that precisely this conflict between propriety and validity judgment is what allows the reflective shift in actor consciousness that one blends with the personal structure, with the emotion of the personal struggle, then it starts to shape, social action. This attention to the emotional struggle linked to legitimacy has largely passed unnoticed in the literature. Then we also may contribute to the emergence of collective action and institutional change. What we know here in this literature is that they really see how productive, how the potential of this multiplicity, the exposure to a multiplicity of institutional arrangements. We add a lot of empirical detail to that. So, but at the same time, we see when we start to see the empirical details of this, the potential of this exposure to multiple incompatible institutional arrangements, we also see that in the early stages of institutional change, there is less threats and opportunities and powerless struggles that this literature usually states. And finally, we also can explain with our model that this legitimate contradiction and these personal stories of the actor totally explains the activism engagement, so the triggering of the collective action, but at the same time, the form of it. And in this case, it combines this aiming for validity with a particular choice of external sources of propriety. And then finally, this is just 1 minute left, and we also contribute to some extent to the literature of esports. First, by detailing this tension, this paradox that was with what I was starting my presentation of, this apparent contradiction between the international success, the emergence of the field, and at the same time, the shaky foundations of this grassroots participation in sports, the personal struggle of many of the actors. And at the same time, and finally, that allows us to start to understand the idiosyncratic shaping of activist movements in esports. Why some movements, for example, try to link esports to and why others actually try to link esports to community-oriented social service. Again, a source of propriety. And that links to the personal biographies and the personal experience of lack of legitimacy and emotional struggle linked to that. And that's it. Thank you very much. I will be very happy to receive feedback, or if you find this interesting, to be in touch with you later on. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And having visited Jönköping at the esports culture and community there is just awesome. I can still remember all those those sit downs in the esports bar quite well. But unfortunately, I had one job in this session, which was to keep time, and I failed. So I have to point you to ask questions in the Discord side, but just maybe a concluding remark, at least to these two presentations. I think these, your paper and the paper by Tobias et al., I mean, they really form a sort of a very complementary set of deep investigation into the development of esports. On one hand, both the sort of more traditional electronic sports organizations, but then also the grassroots, but also both on organizational and individual level. So hopefully in the Discord, you can also raise sort of, discussion even together in the same channel for the whole sort of holistic whole that is going on in the esports culture and its legitimacy. All right, but I will now conclude this session. Thank you all for participating and for the speakers. And I will now give the floor to Maria Törhönen, who has important information to you about the voting of the best paper, not the best paper, but presentation and poster. Maria, are you here?
I'm here. Yeah, so we don't really want to mention this before we've seen all the presentations and posters and everything, but we do usually vote for the best paper presentation and the best poster at the end of the conference, and that time is now. I'll put in a link to the chat, and you now have around 5 minutes to just really casually vote for your favorites, and no one will know until you've all voted. And we'll take a little, don't leave this session, but we'll take just a little breather while we set up the wrap up for the conference and let you vote in peace. So 5 minutes starting from now, and we'll set up the wrap up and start that in a mere moment. So peaceful voting, yes, Henrik.
And maybe I could just add, to clarify, just in case, even though it's probably quite clear to everyone. So this is a vote for the best presentation. So regardless of perhaps the quality of the academic rigor of the study, etc., this voting is really for more of the multimedia presentation and the verbal delivery, etc., of the presenters, as well as then the posters. I guess that's more of a holistic one, but go and do your votes. Thank you. All right. This is the elevator music, elevating elevator music. While we are descending towards the end of the conference, but of course ascending towards the inspiring takeouts from the conference. But I've been informed in my earpiece that the voting is going very well. The voting has already been almost fully commenced, judging by the number of votes thus far as I understand. And so we can sort of start wrapping up the conference. First order of business in our wrap-up will be information about publications and our publication track, which also has been requested a few times throughout the conference. And I think many of you already know the tradition that the gamification group and the community is sort of trying to do in terms of the publication. So we're kind of trying to build, in a way, a gamified publication process where GamiFIN is sort of one part, or probably the main part of venue of presenting work and publishing it. As you know, for the GamiFIN conference, we will publish proceedings in the SEUR proceedings, which is completely open access, completely available online, and all the full papers will be published there. And I'm not sure if Mila will say something about that at some point, but obviously the proceedings will come out very soon in the near future. But what I'm really going to be talking about more here is that we are trying to, and have been building for throughout a couple of last years, that we have this sort of yin and yang conference concept, where we have two exotic locations, one which is in Finnish Lapland, and one which is in Hawaii. And as you know, of course, it's a little bit depending on what kind of virus situation is going on during that year. So it depends, of course, where we are going to be. But so you probably, and many of you have already seen this sort of a nice board game presentation of this publication track, but I'll just very quickly recap it. So the idea is that usually the GamiFIN deadline, the publication or the call for paper, full paper deadline is in December, which then throughout the peer review process goes into the GamiFIN conference, which is April, like it is right now in Finland. And then papers that have been either accepted or rejected can be then resubmitted or expanded to different further venues. So for example, if we go to the Hawaii, which is then the orange circle here, which takes place in January. So the submission deadline for that usually is in June. And especially for papers that, for example, now were presented as posters or doctoral consortium entries, or papers that were unfortunately rejected this year. As you know, we had a fairly competitive acceptance rate. Those papers could probably be submitted to the Higgs conference. And we usually have either special issues in journals, or then just sort of a more ad hoc sort of fast track, although it's not necessarily always a fast track per se in terms of how much it takes time. But we have 3 different journals which have actually asked us fairly proactively that we could sort of host authors to resubmit their works, both from the GamiFIN and Higgs conference to those journals. And I think we can go to the next slide, where we can also actually skip this slide. You already know what is the GamiFIN conference and the Higgs. So this year, or well, not this year, the next year, but the deadline is this year in June 15. We have 6 different tracks co-hosted by the gamification group and other community members. For example, Tobias here is one of the hosts of the digitalization of work track. So a lot of the papers submitted to GamiFIN are directly relevant in these different tracks. Obviously, we have the gamification track, the longest standing gamification track at the Higgs conference, which covers a lot of different gamification topics. We have streaming media and entertainment, which is sort of in the streaming and a little bit in the electronic sports side as well of the gamification phenomena, the larger one. We have engaging governance, which is more looks at the sort of organizations, democracy, governance, municipalities, etc., and how gamification is being imbued in those environments. And then we have more of an XR track. Obviously, one vein of gamification is in sort of these new technologies that immerse us into new worlds. And then we also have this year a dark web mini track, which might be interested to those who are looking at the sort of more negative aspects of gamification, dark patterns, and perhaps even, you know, some of the negative aspects that were mentioned throughout the conference about the sort of gamification and use of money and troubles and addiction. So there's a host, a big palette of different possibilities in this conference this year. So remember, the deadline is in June 15th, and you can find all these call for papers on the Gamification Group website as well. And so let us go to the next slide, which should be about journals. Yes, so we have 3 journals who have actively requested us to channel papers to them from these conferences as the primary and highest quality gamification publication avenue, obviously. So electronic markets, especially very familiar to all the German scholars here. Electronic markets is fairly highly rated, especially in the German ranking systems. We will be channeling papers to that primarily probably from the HICS 2020, but also I believe they welcome papers also channeled through GamiFIN. Internet research and the AIS transactions on human-computer interactions also welcome sort of papers perhaps on a more sort of fluid continuum. So just contact me and we'll figure out how we will do it. And the next slide maybe outlines a little bit even more about the process, how it should be done if it is there. So usually taking a conference paper to a journal, it's obviously that it can't be the same paper. So what it has to be is that it's a very significantly expanded work. So usually that would involve adding a lot of background literature, new theoretical lenses, new studies, new data sets. And someone is showing wrong slides now. But further elaboration and discussion, etc. So usually it would be good to at least expand by 50%. Then obviously for submitting, because it cannot be the same paper, even just for indexing purposes, it has to have a different title, different abstract. Of course, you have to follow the journal formatting guidelines, and of course disclose very clearly for the editors that this paper's earlier version has already been published in this and this conference in the cover letter. And you can email me at any point and let's try to figure out how we will get the fast track going. And you can of course ask, you know, do you think that some paper would fit to some journal, etc., and sort of think about those opportunities. So, and if there's any other questions, you can of course ping me in Discord anytime, and let's find out what we can do. Thank you very much. And what is next in our program? It is Etsiä's Hunt. Welcome, Ilmari, if it's Ilmari.
No, I will be talking. Let's talk out of game for a moment. These are not the right slides, though, because we added new things. I don't know who is in charge of the slides. Anyway, while we wait for the slides to get right. So, okay, they just disappeared. So we want to thank again all the participants of the game. We have been quite busy in these 3 days trying to, well, embody all the different characters and make the game happen in a quite smooth way. We had 9 people participating actively in the game. 9 of them sent the first fragment, 5 of them sent the second fragment as well. But what was more incredible was that 3, in fact almost 4, sent even the third fragment, which is something that wasn't really supposed to happen. We really did our best to leave the clues out there for as little as possible, but several people were well, sharp enough and committed enough to really dig deep and find them. And we had 13 real people that participated to the Discord chat. Thank you very much for the slides, Maria. So 13 real people that participated actively in the Discord chat. So even if they didn't well, strictly speaking, played the game, they participated to it. 6 people that came to the game meeting and had the chance to discuss with Ilmari a little bit before the start. And of course, every participant to the conference was in some way exposed to it, which was also part of the the objective of the game. That was, of course, gamifying a little bit the whole conference. So we wanted to thank our players. What you see here is not a leaderboard because we released the leaderboard back in the wild of Lapland. But you can see the nicknames of the players that they used to contact us through the Gamification and Gamified Creatures Center website, and how many fragments they found. Special mention for Janine, that without actually finding the third, she almost guessed, just thanks to her deductive skills, what the third one was. So really, really good stuff. We had a lot of fun. We are super tired, but really we enjoyed playing with you. We hoped you had fun too. We hope we disrupt the conference a bit, but not too much. And well, hopefully see you for the next SCS game next year. I don't know if Zampeter or Oz want to add something.
Thank you very much for your participation in the game.
And I guess we had one last moment of pathos now, when we just discovered that the mysterious one was in fact Solip Park. So thank you, Solip, for coming out at the last minute. And it was really nice also to see that you were playing with us and using different names and really get into the narrative. So if Oz doesn't have anything else to say, thank you again, and we can move on.
Okay, I guess it's me and Anna. I'm really sorry about that mishap with the presentation. That was my fault. But just a few practical things related to after GamiFIN. So essentially the Discord will remain as it is right now, and it can be used after the conference, but unfortunately we cannot open it to the public because obviously there's a lot of content that people have kind of already paid for the conference content, so we don't really want to open it up. But it will be available for you to use. Also, the links to YouTube videos are the same ones as the live streaming ones you have in Discord. So if you want to go through any of the videos or the recordings, you can do so through YouTube. The proceedings are well on their way, as already mentioned by Milan in the beginning of yesterday. So they will be released quite soon after the conference. And yes, so this morning you should have received an email asking you to rate our Dear GamiFIN 2021. So please respond to that email and send us some feedback so we know how we did this year and how we can improve the conference next year. We have also prepared a survey about the conference, but I think that's something that Anna can talk about a bit more.
I'm not exactly sure about this survey. I wasn't the one that included it there.
No, it's us again.
What have you done to
It's really a team effort, huh?
But
since I'm already here, I just want to say something really fast. I want to appreciate everyone that attended the conference and for the patience that they have with some of the technical issues that we are having. But I'm really glad that everyone is here and is attending. And I'm sorry if anything is not as smooth as it should be. But that's pretty much it from my part. Thank you.
It was perfect, Anna. And just one short thing about the survey. It is a real survey. We will send it hopefully before the end of the weekend. It's for research purposes. It's about the conference, and we will be very grateful if you can spare a few minutes to fill it. Thank you. And thank you again, Anna.
Mattia, do you want to go through these, or did everyone already see?
Should I go through this?
Juho should be then the next one, I believe. Or yes. Do we? Which one do we have first?
Jonna, you can start this. I think we start with the poster and presentation, I believe.
Good to know. Can you tell me which one is the first, the organizers? Can you tell me, please?
Well, actually, we had to change the order a little bit. So the first one will be the Best Poster Award. Not in this order. I'm sorry, because we had to obviously edit a lot of things because of the voting so last minute. So that's why we had to do some editing behind the scenes, which was kind of in front of the scenes. So yes, the poster is the first thing. Do you want to do a drum roll?
So we will first have then the best poster. I'm believing best presentation and best paper comes then in that order.
Yes.
So for the best poster, you all have voted. Thank you for your votes. Thank you for your attention on all the posters on behalf of the presenters, and the votes are in. So the best poster award of GamiFIN 2021 goes to, now can be the drum roll, Yunji Kim, Wonji Kang, and Matthew Riley for cultivating artificial life forms, bringing real-time environmental data to your virtual plant, which was already during the post presentation very, very much appreciated. The graphics, for example, on the app were fantastic. So I think everyone was very fascinated by the app that the team had created. So congratulations on the best poster award. And I believe I can say at this point that there will be something small going to all the award winners, in addition to the award, actually. So you will be getting something from the team. And then the next one will be the presentation, I believe. There is a long tradition already with GamiFIN to have fantastic presentations every single year. This year we had so many nice ones, and which was reflected also in the vote, that there were a lot of presentations that got a lot of votes, but we're very proud of this, that there is this kind of a little bit of competition always going for the best presentation. This year again, we could definitely see it. So I can say that the presentation award winner can be very, very proud of themselves for winning this competition, tight competition again this year. So the best presentation award, drum roll, goes to Janine Krat and Harald von Kaflesch, designing gamification and persuasive systems, a systematic literature review. Again, the presentation was very much loved by everyone during the presentation itself. The interactive elements in that were very, very much appreciated and enjoyed, and made the presentation extremely engaging. So congrats to Janine, and very good job on making the presentation interesting. Congratulations for winning the best presentation. And then I think it's Juho's turn to reveal the thing that everyone's waiting for about the best paper.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, the selection for the best paper of GamiFIN 2021 was selected actually through a very long quantitative and qualitative deliberation within the program committee. It was not an easy choice. And obviously the quality of the papers throughout the entire conference was very high. So everyone obviously should feel proud about their work. And it made the decision really difficult for us in the program committee. But in the end, we kind of arrived into two papers that we considered and were especially discussing, between these two papers, very two different kinds of paper as well. And which is also very happy to see that GamiFIN conference really does have a very wide array of different kinds of work. I mean, we have from empirical, quantitative, to qualitative, to design, and then more artistic and opinion pieces. So obviously that makes the selection also more difficult. But anyway, but there can be only one winner. So the other one will get an honorable mention. So we will reveal two papers. So the paper that will get the honorable mention especially shines because of its innovative and quite unlikely research theme and approach, which is definitely able to sort of open up new ground in investigating what games and gamification really mean and how the experiences within games can be framed in a completely kind of new way. That is sort of how game experience can be viewed from the standpoint of spirituality and vice versa, how spirituality perhaps as well can be seen more like a game experience, and how games could perhaps be better designed to sort of evoke more spiritual experiences as well. At least these are some of the implications that can be drawn. Moreover, the paper was empirically very high quality, and it had a very unique data set. So probably many maybe can already guess which paper I'm talking about, but the recipient of the honorable mention is paper titled Video Games and Religion, Lutheran Church Employees' Perspectives of Similarities Between Virtual and Spiritual Worlds by Samuli Laato and Sampsa Rauti. All right, applause again, yeah. But then we will move on to the best paper. So in the end, the best paper of GamiFIN 2021 answers a very core question when it comes to the gamification research field. It's empirically very rigorous. It's analytically very sophisticated, but it's most fitting when we take into account the sort of the call to action by our keynote speakers of the conference. So Professor Scholz and Mäkler really brought up very important aspects of how gamification research should be developed. And this paper kind of already encapsulates those points this year, even though the recommendations hopefully also move into the next years. So Dr. Kiili highlighted especially that gamification research should tightly integrate gamification into the activity really being gamified and really sort of creating this more full-fledged gamification experiences and implementations, whereas then Mäkler highlighted that gamification research should be sort of more theory-driven and seek to apply theory and measurement much more meticulously than many of their papers usually do. And sort of beyond the best paper of gamification 2021 succeeding to report a very complete paper within the sort of short confines of the conference paper format, it also completely succeeds in ticking these boxes that our keynotes really had drawn. So therefore, it's a super high quality paper, but at the same time, it sort of completely fits into the sort of new insights that were also drawn during the conference. So therefore, the best paper of GamiFIN 2021 is The Role of Gameful Perception as a Mediator for Intrinsically Motivating Gamification by Henrik Wesselo, Niklas Budensik, Tim Pantel, Felix Stein, Philip Scheslat, and Matthias Schumann. Congratulations! Yay!
Congratulations both to the honorary mention winner as well as then the best paper. Great job, but both great papers, and as you was saying, it was a tight race.
Thank you very much.
Indeed. You have to let me win in the games today.
All right. I'll do. I'm still kind of astonished though, but thanks very much. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And I don't remember what the next slide holds. All right.
I think it's time to take a group picture. So I know that someone already did. Can you show the next slide, please, Juho? So I know that someone, to celebrate a GamiWin, already took a group picture, but it would be nice to picture with all of us. So next slide, please. All those that would like to be in the picture, please turn on your camera. All those that would not like to be in the pictures, please don't turn on your camera, turn it off. Be patient. I need to take screenshots and I have 2 screens and I will definitely mess up something. I don't want to lose it. So please smile and then we will share the picture on social media, on our Discord, etc. Okay, so look in the camera. Everybody smile. Okay, 1 second, because there are many of us, so I need to take 2 in order to have everybody. And okay, just 1 more second. Again, everybody look in the camera. Everybody smile. And let me see. Yes, we have it.
It's like US border control.
Exactly. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is this going to be Oz?
Yes. So, thank you everyone for great activities that you have been undertaking. We have played a lot of games, to name some: Overwatch, Valorant, Among Us, and I think there was also another imposter situation going on in our conference. League of Legends, Scribble and Six, and IMMT. And there was, I think, glorious winning moments that might even add a new alternative to the name of the conference in coming years. So today evening is, of course, I would expect that you would go out and drink a beer on Friday, but most probably this will not be the case. So you can take your drinks and come to your computer, and still we can go on what we have been doing in the last 2 days and play more games today. So hopefully see you also in this evening.
All right, so let's look into the future. So GamiFIN 2022, which is still distant, and it might prove to be yet another time and place where we explore liminal spaces. While last year the liminal space was moving from the real world to the virtual world, which was also a tragic experience for Ilmari. This year we were perhaps in a more normal circumstance again in different ways. Maybe next year we can move back into the Finnish Lapland. But seriously, we have been considering that next year we would obviously hope that we can be in Finnish Lapland. But even if we can, we probably want to move towards another kind of liminal space, I guess, where we would host a hybrid conference, so which would be also possible for participants to participate in online to the conference. And maybe this could be something we will inquire also from you in our feedback form to investigate how would you feel about these different options. But obviously, if the situation would remain dire, then we of course would convene again online, which again this year has been a fantastic experience. The conference has gone very well, and maybe I could again take this opportunity to thank everyone. I mean, it has been great. We have had a record number of participants. Really want to thank everyone who participated, submitted papers, whether they were accepted or not. Of course, our organizing committee, which has obviously Maria Törhönen, Mattia Thibault there on the screen as well, August Puruk, Anna Klok, Sampetta Lekaki, Ginny Guillen, our keynotes, Christian Kiili, of course, Elisa Mekler, and I'm probably forgetting someone, Mila Puic and Henrietta Jylhä as well, and also my magnificent co-chair, Jonna Koivisto. And of course, all the reviewers, again, I mean, peer review process is a big undertaking. It takes a lot of time and patience, and we have had a very good program committee team, as well as all the reviewers of the conference who also have been able to participate in this conference for free this year. I hope I'm not promising too much. And maybe with that, I can at least now give it to my co-chair at this point to also maybe say some concluding remarks. Jonna.
yeah, well, my concluding remarks is a little bit repeating what you just said on my part as well. Thank you, everyone, for being part of our GamiFIN community, making it possible for us to come together, have these events despite all these situations, come together online and keep growing and just create new knowledge around this topic that we're all interested in. So thank you, all the participants, all the keynotes, the organizers, having done again, like now we had already, well, you had, I have been a little bit aside from the organization actually, but we had a bit of experience already how to do this online. But fantastic job, everyone, again, and of course thank you to Juho, my co-chair, for steering the ship and just keeping us having these great events. So yeah, thank you to everyone. It has really been well, 3 days, but of the actual conference, 2 days of very, very interesting papers, a lot of great conversations. I'm always really happy to see how, given these online constraints that we have, that the conversation is really going on in Discord, and we have been able to get that sort of a real conference feel. So at least from our side, this all has been such a pleasant experience and conference again, and we really hope that it has been the same for you, and we're looking forward to hearing your feedback as well. But yeah, just I am very much looking forward to next year already. As Juho said, we would be delighted to get to be in Lapland. Hopefully that will happen, but if not, then we already know we have a great working format here. The hybrid options are, I think we will see more of those for conferences in general. So we will be exploring that as well. But yeah, just a massive thank you to everyone for being part of GamiFIN this year.
Yeah, maybe I could highlight one more thing, which I think Joanna already kind of mentioned, but it is really the audience and the participants who are really making the conference. I mean, without the sort of constant interaction and vibrant discussion and really proactive participation, this conference would not be what it is. So I really want to humbly thank everyone again for participating. And also, like last year, I think the sort of really the feeling is very communal and very warm feeling. So I think that continued really this year, and it's very much a pleasure to organize this conference, which is a great experience. And hopefully next year again, it will be even better. Thank you so much. And let's continue the conference this evening as well. And I'm not sure if we had some more slides in here or not, but.
I think we're done.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I guess that then concludes on our part the event. Yeah, we're all just looking forward to next year. But as said, there is so much good conversations going on already on Discord, so let's keep those alive. And as Oz mentioned, there needs to be the normal conference fun in the form of grabbing a drink or your beverage of choice and joining the games and having fun with people and networking on the side. So hopefully everyone can join that as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye, I guess.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Super fun as always.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.